something savory. Red cabbage. Rotkraut, German word. Now, it's my dad's favorite, and I really mean favorite food. He can eat red cabbage, cooked red cabbage that is, for breakfast, lunch and dinner really. It's quite interesting. Like even his grandmother would comment on it that that boy would always eat red cabbage. So, you know someone loves it. But I like it too. So red cabbage, the way my grandmother used to make it, is essentially is a sweet and sour kind of cooked, shredded vegetable. A lot of people heard of sauerkraut. That's fermented white cabbage. So that's where the Germans get the nickname krauts from. But lesser known is the red cabbage version, which isn't fermented. It's just cooked with spices and vinegar. In my family, we put the red cabbage, instead of your veg in a typical Kiwi kind of lunch, roast, dinner scenario, we use the red cabbage instead of that. And so we would have a beef dish of some description. I've made the sauerbraten, for example, and then we have either potatoes or dumplings with it and red cabbage instead of any other vegetable. Now red cabbage is essentially, it's a seasonal dish really. I mean, you can have it these days all year round, but back in the day, you would eat them, in the growing season. Although they last in the fridge quite a long time. So what you need to do is you need to either slice it or shred your cabbage, your red cabbage. And I've already done that. I'll show you in a minute. I like mine a bit chunky, to have a bit of bite. But if you make it nice and fine, that's totally up to you. And then the other main ingredient that you will need is speck. Now speck is, I think the closest thing to speck would be bacon or pancetta actually, because pancetta is smoked as well. So speck essentially is smoked cured pork belly, and in Germany you can just, it's cheap as chips, you buy it in the supermarket or at the butcher's, and usually has about that much fat on it. It's a different type of pig over there, so they actually want the fat on the pigs. So and then you would finely kind of dice that fat and render it down in the pot, as a flavor giver. Now if you're vegetarian, of course you don't put speck in it, because it's pig fat. You just use vegetable oil. It just gives it a nice kind of flavor. And here in New Zealand you can use bacon or bacon bits, or if you can get your hands on pancetta, the nice fat pancetta you want. And or if you're lucky enough like me, I go to Auckland every so often, and there's the European Deli on Lincoln Road, and they actually have speck. It's still not the same as what we have in Germany or in Europe in general, but it's it's not bad in terms of flavor. And then the other optional ingredient is apple, not too finely diced, peeled and diced. So because I've got a really big pot on the go, and so there's 2 apples, fairly large apples. And then the other thing is a couple of spices. So I'll show you when I'm zooming in a little bit how to prepare those and how to put it all together. But essentially it's it's something you can prepare a day early, or like I cook a massive pot and then I freeze it. And so when I have the next beef dish that fits, I just take a pack out of the freezer and it's ready to go, so I don't have to go through the whole process again, because I don't always have the speck on hand, or even the red cabbage for that matter, you know. So it's a good thing. And you will need some, you know, vinegar and sugar and things like that, but we get to that in a minute. Rightio, here we are. So I put a little bit, I mean really just about a tablespoon of oil, vegetable oil in here, and now I'm adding my speck. And so speck, here you go, is essentially, you know, like I cut it into quite large cubes and I leave the fatty bits, see this one, larger. So for those people who don't like the fatty bits and it's a bit chewy, you can just fish them out at the end. And just pop them in until it comes to a sizzle. Meanwhile, good. Meanwhile, I have peeled a whole onion, and what I'll do next is I explain all the other spices. I've got some cloves, and so my grandmother would always do this way, and so I'm doing it that way as well. So what I'll do is I grab about 5 of these and spike them into the onion, like so. There you go. Same sort of reason you can fish them out at the end. This is just for people who don't like cloves or onions for that matter. Okay. And I pop that in here as well. And let the onion brown a little bit, if I can. Right here. So these are allspice. I've used it in a lot of dishes. You can use ground if you like, about or depending on how much cabbage you have, it's really up to your taste. But I'd say about a teaspoon of ground allspice. But I'm just using however many that is, about a dozen, and pop them in. And then I've got, I'm lucky, I've got some juniper bearings. Oh, doesn't have them in. And very important, a couple of bay leaves. About 4 or 5. And some whole pepper. Peppercorn. There you go. And while it was nicely flickering, careful with that. Unfortunately, my stove only goes hot, hotter, and not at all. So it's a bit of a mish with this. Anyway, so these are kind of browned off a little bit. There's a bit of a residue on the bottom of the pot now. And now it's time to add my large bowl of cabbage. Righty-o. So what I do now is I basically sweat it down a little bit. And in order to help that, season it, salt and pepper. Pretty straightforward. Again, that's up to your taste, but you would want to taste it anyway later on. Pepper. I know it's unusual for a vegetable to get that many spices in, but that's just the way it is. There you go. And now the most important ingredient, vinegar. And I'm using 2 different types. I'm using red wine vinegar and white vinegar. And it's going to splash now. I've noticed the vinegar in New Zealand isn't quite as strong as it is in Germany, or at least some of the vinegars in Germany. And, so essentially the cabbage is supposed to be on the sour side of things, but in order to get the sweet side of things, you're also going to put in a good heaped or 2 tablespoons sugar. This is a lot of cabbage, so I'm putting 2 in. And last but not least, my diced apple. And now you give it all a good stir until the cabbage is kind of wilted down a little bit. And then you can fill it up with water, I'll show you in a minute, and then you boil it for at least 40 minutes, or simmer it, not boiling, sorry, simmer it for at least sort of 40 minutes. Rightio, so this is, I don't know if you can see this, it's wet down quite a bit. So it's still quite chunky, and it's, you know, got quite a lot of bite in it, so it needs to sort of simmer on a low heat if I can manage it. Yeah, for at least sort of about 40 minutes, an hour. And I just fill this up with some extra water. It takes it off the boil a little bit, just so it doesn't stick to the bottom. And that's really it. So obviously, a big pot like this, you know, will feed even a large family for 2 meals, and it's not quite full. It's about 3 liters at the moment. But you know, we have it for lunch or dinner, and then the rest I put into little containers and freeze it, and then take it out of the freezer as we need it in portion sizes, and it, you know, makes sense. So that is my grandmother's Saxon. I don't know if it's just Saxon or not. Apple red cabbage, sweet and sour. So give it a try. It's a bit of an acquired taste, I think. Either you like it or you don't. I love it, if I may say so myself, although nothing really compares with my grandmother's cooking. I mean, her red cabbage is out of this world. I don't know, there's a special feel to it. But yeah, there you go. Enjoy that one.